Morning, everyone. Welcome to Global Studies 197, Diversity of Perspectives on Peace and Conflict, the Marxism we need. This is a course, one of the team taught courses at the Center for International Studies, and we would like to thank you all for being with us today. We still have 1 minute, exactly 1 minute to officially begin our solidarity webinar for Youth Strike PH. And we're still waiting for our guest speakers to come, but our comrades from One Big Strike are already here, and we're happy to have them. So let's wait 2 minutes. Hi, good morning once again. So welcome to the Center for International Studies, Global Studies 197, Diversity of Conflict, Diversity of Perspectives on Peace and Conflict, the Marxism we need for a strike wave. And we're very happy to have Today, our guest from the University of the Philippines Department of Journalism, Professor Danny Arao, and from the City University of New York Political Science Department, Professor Karina Mullen. But before we begin, the UP Center for International Studies would like to recognize the brave and young organizers of One Big Strike, Youth Strike PH. And so I would like to call on Elise Olifada of the Ateneo Manila University, one of the great strike organizers who actually called for a strike. So she's here with us. Elise, can you unmute? And so maybe Elise can share with us some updates. But also on Monday, we will have student leaders to participate in a webinar and tell us all about the organizing that goes on with Youth Strike PH. But Elise is here with us to receive our token of recognition, which we'll be projecting in a bit. So go ahead.
Good morning sa lahat. Ako po si Elise mula sa One Big Strike. Sa kasalukuyan, inaayos po namin ang nag-organize po kami to further accommodate the criticisms and the suggestions of the Atenean students with regards to the demands of the strike. So, in relation to that, we are also in contact with other schools, other organizations who are calling for an academic strike. So we have contacts with FEU, with UP, with UST, NU, UE, etc. So we are hoping that this can be on a nationwide scale, and we are hoping that more people will support and continue to join the strike with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. And at this point, may I request Bianca, our research associate at the Center for International Studies, to project our token of recognition for the organizers of One Big Strike. May we have that?
Wait lang.
Yeah. We would like to welcome our students, our guests, our fellow faculty members, and fellow activists who are here on Zoom and on YouTube Live. I think we're having a little bit of a problem. Let's see. Oh, there you are. We have started screen sharing. Okay. So here's our little token of appreciation for, well, so let me just read it. The Global Studies 197, Diversity of Perspectives on Peace and Conflict, module on the Marxism we need. We are awarding this certificate of appreciation to One Big Strike for igniting the Youth Strike PH, given this 20th day of November 2020 at the UP Center for International Studies virtual classroom. Thank you very much at mabuhay ang mga kabataan. Okay, great. Yeah, so we will have Elise and some of the other youth leaders from One Big Strike on Monday, same time, 10 a.m. right, Elise? Thank you so much. So at this point, we would like to proceed to um, our first speaker. Uh, she is a professor of political science at the Hunter College, no, John Jay College, City University of New York. And she's also an organizer with People's Strike. She's a very active member of the union, City University of New York International Committee. And I would like to personally thank Professor Karina Mullen, Comrade Karina, for suggesting that we come out with a petition, because that petition has been going around the world since yesterday, since last night. Many professors from different universities, from different continents have signed it. So we're very happy. And yeah, so Karina used to teach at Tunisia for many years, and that is her expertise, basically the Arab region. But she's also one of the very staunch scholars advocating for the causes of the people's struggles in the global south, and she's here with us to share uh, to express her solidarity and share with us what's also going on at the City University of New York. Karina, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for the Center also for International Studies and University of Philippines, and to all of the students who are undertaking this brave, amazing strike action. You have my full solidarity, and I want to know what I can do more to be in solidarity with you, and what we here at CUNY in New York more broadly can do to be in solidarity with you too. So I hope this is really going to be more of a discussion than just a talk. Sarah asked me to talk a little bit about this question of anti-imperialism and the role of scholars and the university. I wanted to think a little bit maybe theoretically about that question first, and then to get into a little bit more concrete discussion about what's happening here at CUNY, where we are undergoing a very similar struggle to what you all are undergoing to a certain extent, in the sense of we're facing massive cuts. The university has mobilized the COVID-19 crisis as an excuse, really, to push through a neoliberal restructuring that has been on the agenda for many years. And so we are trying to resist that. The union, in many ways, the rank and file of the union are pushing to have more militant labor action and organizing with student groups too, who see that it's in their interest, essentially, not only to resist the kind of cuts that are happening in the name of COVID and the current health crisis, and not just to return to the status quo ante, what existed before, which was itself part of the problem, but really to think about what a transformed, decolonized, liberated university looks like, and what a real people to really transform. Oftentimes CUNY is referred to as a people's university, and we want to really make it become that. So I maybe what I'll do is sort of leave that last bit open, and we can have more of a discussion and questions. But I wanted to and answer in that sense. But I wanted to start with just a couple of points about thinking about what the sort of role of the university is in our social, in our struggles, in our various struggles. We can think about the university itself, of course, is a colonial capitalist institution, at least, the westernized university, the westernized modern university. It's designed it was designed to reproduce capitalist inequalities within society. and also to reinforce hierarchies globally through Western global, Northern epistemological domination. Mahmoud Mamdani, who some of you may be familiar with, talked about the Western university as the first form of structural adjustment, in the sense that it applies this one sort of universal standard and way of knowing to the rest of the world, devalorizing other forms of knowledge, but also, of course, the material dimension of that through brain drain, other forms of knowledge extraction that happens through colonial forms of research and publishing, which I'd love to talk about more with you if people are interested. But in addition to that, we also know that there is this, the other side to the university, that the university is also a site of struggle, and it's been a site of struggle across the world. In the global South, it was a site of anti-colonial, it has been a site of anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist struggle. And, I don't need to tell you all that, because I know that's what you're doing here and have been doing. And also in the global North, even in the global North, even in the belly of the beast in the US, the university has often been a site of that kind of struggle. And we can go back to the 60s when these kinds of struggle, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist struggles were taking shape and within the university, but also those struggles were being connected up with the struggles happening outside of the university, labor, anti-racist struggles, and thinking about the role of the university in the kinds of dispossession that racial capitalism, of course, facilitates. So, for example, in terms of the role of the university in, as speculative real estate, gentrification, the kind of colonial dispossession that gentrification entails. So connecting the dots between those struggles and also with anti-imperialist struggles. So that kind of role, that the sort of dual nature of the university, on the one hand as an institution of colonial capitalism, but on the other hand also a space, a site of real resistance. So within that context of resistance, one of the people who I most admire in terms of my intellectual work, but also in terms of my political work, is, of course, the Guyanese Marxist historian and activist Walter Rodney, whose book, The Groundings with My Brothers, if you haven't read, you must read, is a reflection on revolutionary pedagogy and praxis in the context of the Black Power struggles that were unfolding in the Caribbean in the 1980s. I'm particularly inspired by his concept of the guerrilla intellectual, in which he stressed the obligation of intellectuals to ground their work in the community where we are, and thinking about the importance of the university as a site of struggle, the importance of committing ourselves as scholars to blending our studies with deep political engagement and struggles outside of the class. Rodney discussed the need to ground, he called it, intellectual labor in the activities of the masses. And it was through engaging in the mutual exchange, he said, of knowledge with those struggling on the ground that the revolutionary scholar would develop their most effective resistance to the oppressive and exploitive systems of power. And I think, there are lots of other scholars who have written on this, and I certainly have been influenced by Robin Kelly, for example, when he talks about the history of Black studies in the US context, and out of those struggles in the 60s, departments like Black Studies, Puerto Rican Studies, Ethnic Studies were created as a result of amazing, activism of students, of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, other people of color in the US who really wanted to challenge that the white Western canon that the colonial university is based upon, and to center the knowledge and experiences of oppressed, marginalized communities, dispossessed communities, whose, of course, on the basis of whose wealth, the extraction of wealth has gone into creating the accumulation, capitalist accumulation, and on whose backs really the U.S. empire is built. So Robin Kelley has done quite a lot of work on that, and he talks about in his work, he says that the most interesting ideas and also correct analysis, he says, grow out of a concrete intellectual engagement with the problems of aggrieved populations confronting systems of oppression. So I think those are really crucial points to think about in terms of the role of academics, and how academic labor should be rooted in academic knowledge production, should be rooted in those in most oppressed communities, and should have a liberatory aim. And in the context of the US, of course, if we're thinking about liberatory knowledge production, both in terms of research and output in that sense, but also in terms of learning and education, there are sort of two central elements to that. On the one hand, thinking about demystifying and exposing the systems that dispossess, exploit, and oppress us, we need to think about, and especially the most vulnerable among us, we need to analyze and resist racial capitalism and settler colonialism. And then also, so that's the kind of domestic orientation, and then externally, the way in which that is expressed, and in terms of, again, sort of the accumulation through dispossession on which racial capitalism is based. The external expression of that, of course, is imperialism. And so liberatory knowledge production in that sense needs to be in the service of anti-imperialism, as well as anti-racism and the resistance against settler colonialism. So those are, the sort of axes in which a kind of liberatory academic project would be based. And so within that, I just want to think a little bit more concretely about two aspects to that. One being thinking about sort of scholars and academics within CUNY and the long tradition of student and scholars challenging anti-racism and anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism. That goes back, as I said, to the 60s at CUNY, and I mentioned sort of more broadly across the US university, but of course the globe really in the 60s. In CUNY as well, as really a working class university, public university that initially, I should point out, was free until, and this points out why we need to make the connection between what happens in the broader community and what happens within the walls of the university. Although, of course, the university is often presented as this idealized space, never has been, and certainly isn't now. CUNY, which started out as a free university, started charging tuition after some of these struggles in the 60s, where you had radical Black and student of color-led struggle for open admissions. And that forced the university to open its doors to previously excluded students, resulting in eventually the introduction of tuition to kind of reverse that trend. Although it was justified at the time by austerity, fiscal austerity, which is also what's being used now to justify equally racist policies that have the same racist impact, because the majority of our students at CUNY are people of color, Black, Latinx, and other people of color. So this is a struggle that goes back to the 60s, and struggles around creating Puerto Rican Studies Department, ethnic studies, Africana studies were led by students who were engaged in the Black Panthers, radical organizations like the Young Lords, anti-imperialist groups. And that's also a period that saw CUNY become more heavily policed, as well as other universities, heavily policed around the country. And I want to talk about that later. That's one of the demands that we're thinking about of what a transformed university, a decolonized university looks like. And that's one that doesn't have police. That's one where, based on, that believes in, is centered on the abolition of police, doesn't have surveillance, and all those things that lead to, that criminalize our students and criminalize dissent. So that's just another point. And then secondly, I just want to say, and then tell me how much time I've got. Sarah, do you want me to finish up?
Just wrap up. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll just make this point and then I can talk about the ongoing struggle afterwards if you want.
Right.
Just to say, as workers, I wanted to say also, what does it mean to be anti-imperialist in the university in general, and also at CUNY? So again, this is a different situation for us in the global North. As workers, we're also part of the labor aristocracy, even in the university. So how can we use our power in a liberatory way? Not just in the way we research but produce knowledge production, but also in terms of labor organizing. And that brings me to my work with the International Committee, which you mentioned with the PSC. They're an amazing group of anti-imperialists who focus on, and Sarah, because you've been part of them, part of the organization, focusing on political education, building solidarity with workers across the globe. And doing that, of course, means recognizing that US imperialism, by destroying lives, infrastructure, the social fabric of countries through its wars, what Ali Kadri describes as the destruction and waste side of capital accumulation, is what allows for the super exploitation of global South labor. So standing in solidarity with workers of the global South must mean resisting imperialism. And so that is the basis when people talk about internationalism and solidarity with global South workers, that has to be, the basis on which that solidarity grows. And so our PSC International Committee has pushed for resolutions within our union against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're currently working on a no Cold War with China resolution, also around censorship, denial of free speech around Palestinian liberation. And hopefully as well, some of us would like to look at the role of the AFL-CIO, which we're affiliated, and their past, as well as some people might say present orientation towards a pro kind of imperialist agenda. So I'm going to end with that, and I'm happy to talk about anything else you want me to talk about, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Corina. Corina will be with us again for the conversation after the presentation of our next speaker. He is a professor at the Department of Journalism, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Of course, he's also my org mate at the Congress of Teachers and Educators for Nationalism and Democracy. He is an associate editor of Bulatlat. He is the current editor of Media Asia and the convener of Contradaya. We're very happy to have here with us Professor Danilo Araw. Danny.
Hello, good morning to all of you. Sarah, can you hear me?
You can make it louder.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry, low technology prevents us from having the best microphones. But anyway, good morning to all of you, and thank you to Corina for providing the necessary theoretical and normative framework in terms of analyzing the academic strike. So for this particular session, with the limited time that we have, we shall try to talk about the current situation in the Philippines and hopefully see how certain problems in the Philippines, like imperialism, would be part in terms of trying to fight the existing system. So for this particular session, we want to define certain terms or what we call terms of engagement, because sometimes when we hear the phrase academic break, we think that, oh, this is just a lazy way out for students to uh, pass the course without much work. But basically, when you talk about academic break, it's a recovery period that should involve trying to ensure the safety and security, not just of ourselves, but also of our loved ones, given the typhoons, as well as the global pandemic that we are facing. Now, academic ease would have two dimensions here. One option is to end the semester altogether, where we waive all academic requirements and then we do what we call mass promotion. So a non-numeric grading system would have to be given uh, since there would be no basis anymore for providing, a weighted average for our students. So it's either we give them a grade of pass or P, or the student would just drop the course. Although personally, I would prefer that the P grade be provided to students, well, at least in general. Now, the second component of academic is, and we would want that to be the subject of much, scrutiny later on, would be the call of certain sectors to just simply extend the semester, meaning that we adjust the calendar. For example, in the University of the Philippines, the classes are supposed to end by December 9, and then the finals week will happen after that. So an extension could mean perhaps by 1 week or 2 weeks, or maybe even until January or February, we don't know. But the bottom line is that the current semester will continue. So there will be no waiving of all academic requirements because we will just be either retaining or easing the academic requirements depending on the prerogative of the faculty handling the course. And given that we will be extending the semester, it makes no sense to provide for a mass promotion of students because you will still be doing academic work. You will still have your own respective course workload. So therefore, you would have a numeric grading system there. So we have to keep that in mind because when we talk about nuances of the academic strike, we have to properly contextualize it to what Corina mentions about the role of the university and the fundamental problems that we're facing even before this pandemic struck. So when we talk about neoliberalism in the university, we also have to deal with the commercialized character of education. So therefore, when you talk about academic strike, it's of course the most fundamental here would be the demand for an enabling environment for learning, meaning that there should be clear internet connection in the case of remote learning or blended learning or whatever term you call the new normal of studying certain courses. So the enabling environment should be there, and then the safe return to school should also be assured, most especially in a situation where there might be physical face-to-face interaction by the next semester. So a safe return would have to be assured. But of course, we have to dig deeper into it because the problem, it's not just the educational system, but the overall social system. So that's why the academic strike takes into account the collective denunciation of the incompetence, inefficiency, and corruption of the powers that be. And that is where the anti-imperialist angle would have to be properly appreciated because the basic problems of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism are still very much around, even before the pandemic and even before this particular administration. So that kind of a perspective would have to be adopted by students, faculty, and other concerned groups and individuals to ensure that we can really approach the academic strike and approach the problems besetting the country from a more systemic and structural perspective rather than focus on the personalities or just simply, the palliative measures of making certain reforms in the university that is inherently, as Corina correctly mentioned, not really as liberative as we would want it to be because of certain myths of neoliberalism. And even here in the country, the reality of red tagging is something that we also have to approach and confront effectively. So that's why an academic strike would have naturally an element of regime change, calling for the ouster of you know who as an example. And of course, again, we take we hold responsible the various government officials as well as the prevailing social system uh, as regards the suffering of many people. In other words, what the large populace are going through is going through right now would just be the trigger with regard to the storms that hit them as well as the pandemic. But they've been suffering even before this happened. So that's why right now you have history practically repeating itself, right? So there are certain calls that there should be no classes until there is regime change. In terms of context, just quickly, so that we can maximize the time, the trigger, of course, these past few days would be the call of the Ateneo students to go on academic strike. And then, of course, it didn't help that a certain Harry Roque would say that they will fail if they do not fulfill certain academic requirements and that their future, the Ateneo students' future, would be compromised if they go on strike. But of course, this was met by not just rage from the students of Ateneo, but from a large number of students, not just from UP, but also from other universities far away from Katipunan and Quezon City. At the same time, Duterte, as expected, vented his ire against the UP community and again said that this is said to be the ground for recruitment of the communists, and he even threatened to, remove funding from the state university. But of course, at the same time, and this might be a little bit off, but it's still related to what we're discussing, there is solidarity on the part of certain concerned faculty to call for the end to the current semester for the reasons that we talked about a while ago, given the untenable situation and the suffering of many people. And then, again, you have government officials saying that you shouldn't be doing that because the taxpayers pay for the tuition of students enrolled in state universities. But of course, this is, a perverted view of class analysis where a certain government official said that for the Ateneo, it's okay for them to go on strike, especially if it's not an issue with their parents because they come from rich families anyway. But we'll deal with that later. And then, of course, right now, we have a situation where universities are on an academic break. Not much for political reasons, but mainly because of the aftermath of Typhoon Ulysses, where, as we all know, certain places like Marikina, Tabaco, Catanduanes, and Tuguegarao, of course, were flooded by the typhoon. And of course, many people lost their homes. There were people who died. So therefore, there should be an academic break. I think for many universities, it ends this week, but at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, it's much longer. So the academic break will end by Friday next week. Of course, for the Commission on Higher Education, it argues that there should be no nationwide or Luzon-wide academic break, and that the chair of the Commission on Higher Education goes on record to say that he is against any academic break, and the most that universities can do would be to adjust the academic calendar. In other words, as early as now, even in the absence of empirical studies, he goes on to claim that universities should extend the semester, and that in not so many words, the faculty and the students should just grin and bear it and make sure that we end this particular semester according to schedule, or at least adjusted, or at least based on the adjusted calendar. Now, just quickly, when we try to make a stand on something, we try to consult the students. So in the case of the 4 courses that I am handling, this is just to share with you the sentiments of my students. There are those who do not want to end the semester, but they're in the minority. And let me just tell you that some students, and this is just anecdotal evidence, just so we can have a clear conversation on this, they are not in favor of ending the semester, but only for the simple reason that they are being left behind and they think it is unfair for the students who complied if they're not able to submit. So sometimes it has to be clarified to students that you are not getting a free ride as a result of mass promotion or as a result of ending the semester, because there are certain circumstances that are beyond your control. And I'm sure many faculty members can relate to that, where the students would be very, very apologetic to us for not being able to attend classes because of poor internet connection. Or some of them, they would get disconnected in the middle of the class and they're not able to come back, and then they would come back to us to say that they're very, very sorry for what happened. Of course, the apology would be appreciated, but of course, we do understand that these are circumstances that are beyond their control. And that's the perspective of many students. So much as majority would want to end the semester, those who do not want to end the semester we should actually see the context in which they wouldn't want to do so, because there is a much deeper problem than that, and that's where the critical analysis and the class analysis would be very, very useful, not just for faculty but also for students in terms of trying to convince a broader number of people to our cause. Now, as of this morning, I'm sure you've read this. If you read between the lines of the statement of the UP Chancellor this morning, this has something to do with defunding UP and red tagging, but in the last 3 paragraphs, he mentioned the call to end the semester. While on one hand, the Chancellor did not fully support or explicitly support the call to end the semester, he recognizes and understands where it's coming from. And in fact, toward the end, he even mentioned that critical thinking should be defended and that our right to protest should be recognized and defended as well. So these are positive signs, and this leads us to the last point that I would want to discuss. Fortunately, I still have some time. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left here. So of course, the need to end the semester rests on two glaring situations. First, there is no clear conducive environment regarding the conduct of remote learning or blended learning. We don't have a sense of government right now. Of course, we have a president, but basically he is practically not doing much in terms of alleviating the plight of the people, especially the marginalized. We have to look at the bigger picture, not just the nuances of the issue. The bigger political struggle is the need for systemic change. We don't just want palliative solutions to the problem in the educational sector, because this is also symptomatic of the crisis that we're in right now. Forging alliances with like-minded people and groups would also be necessary because we can do much by being more organized and by increasing the ranks of those who believe in our cause. So we have to win over as many students, faculty, administrators, and even parents. And the need to reaffirm certain principles about structural problems besetting the Philippines, about the need to battle imperialism. And of course, we don't have much time to talk about bureaucrat capitalism and feudalism, but the bottom line is that, okay, my time is up. Okay, but nevertheless, if I will just be allowed 1 more minute here, we need to transcend whatever we think of privileges to ensure that we would be able to transcend our own personal interests. So that's all for now. Okay, thank you for the time, and I'm sorry for extending by 1 minute and 3 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm really so happy to have in one panel Danny and Karina. It's been my dream for the two of you to finally to meet, and here you are. And we're also very happy to have Elisa with us. And this is the open forum where our guest speaker can actually ask questions to each other, where we can also invite questions from our audience, but I'm sure that our guests will also be very happy to listen to your comments. But first, so I would like to pick up where Danny ended. So he practically ended it with what can be done. How can we support each other? So I would like now to give the floor to Corina and then Eliza for them to tell us more about their particular struggles so we know how to reach out and coordinate and make our ranks stronger. Please go ahead, Karina. Would you like to tell us more about what goes on in CUNY? And
Sure. Yeah, I'm really, I just want to say thank you so much, Danilo, for your amazing the context that you provided and your analysis. It was really helpful for understanding what's going on the university there, and there are lots of parallels and intersections with our own struggle. I especially like what you said about linking the strike up to the bigger political struggle, and that being what's happening at the national level, as well as the kind of political economy dimension of it as well. And I think that's really crucial to what we're trying to do here at CUNY as well, because so much of these discussions around the university and the transformations that are taking place, they often try to disconnect the university from that broader political, social, economic space, right? Of course, it's not disconnected. And everything, when we talk about resources and the resources that are available for the university, it's never a question of whether the resources exist. They do exist. It's how are they distributed, and to what, and that's really, especially at a public university, that's a crucial question that we keep coming up against. So it's also about challenging those austerity narratives that say that this is something necessary that has to happen. And so linking up to the politics of the state, that lead to these kinds of policies, that we need to have a change in those politics. And I guess, and I'd like to hear more about the Philippines in the U.S. context of neoliberalism and the restructuring of the state. What that entailed, of course, was, on the one hand, people tend to think about neoliberalism as a reduction of the state, or withering away of the state. In fact, really, it's a restructuring, because the resources are still there again, but they're put into other places like policing and the military, the repressive apparatuses of the state. And so that's the kind of fascist dimension of the state that gets strengthened in the context of neoliberalism. And that's what we have to fight. And so calling for the resources to be redirected into institutions that are life affirming, that are liberatory, is also part of challenging that repression. And so I think that's why I'm in full agreement about linking our struggle with that bigger political struggle. And so just, a few words about CUNY. We I don't know if, well, probably not, I'm sure Sarah is aware that in New York that we have a really anti-labor law. Of course, that's another feature of neoliberalism, is that it's profoundly anti-labor. In the US, you have across the country all kinds of anti-labor legislation that was rolled out in the context of the shift towards neoliberalism and away from a kind of embedded liberalism. Was a feature of the sort of post-World War II Keynesianism. And that is still with us today. So we technically, the Taylor law in New York means that we are not allowed as a public institution to go on strike. So the buildup towards a strike is really, it's very sensitive in New York, because it means taking on the law. It means doing something, you know, illegal, quote unquote, illegal. And so the point that you made about linking up with making connections with other like-minded people and building those connections outside and solidarity outside of the university is crucial, because we need that support. Like you said, we need parents, of students, of the broader community that is hurt by these same policies. You know, and in the context of COVID, of course, the inequalities are exacerbated even more. Who's impacted, who has access to health care, all of these questions that, you know, the inequalities that were already existent are just exacerbated, and in the context of the US, of course, in a very racialized way. And so we need to build those connections and to point out how those same policies that are killing people, that are leading to, you know, people's death either through slow violence, the structural violence of capitalism, you know, neoliberal capitalism, or through the material violence of the police. They are the same forces that are gutting out the university and destroying the university. And so the more we can make those connections, the more we can build the solidarity we need to, in the context of CUNY, to be able to build towards a strike. And I hope that we're going to be able to do that. It's a difficult, it sounds like there are lots of similar issues to take into consideration with what you all are facing there. But, you know, we have I think you're further along than we are. We have a long way to go. We're just now trying to get our union to pass a strike authorization vote. Actually, as we speak, there's a debate going on right now. So we'll see where that ends up. But I want to learn from you. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we didn't know we would be on a strike until the students actually announced it, and so we're very happy about this. And but of course, I have to say that this is not a very we're not in a very convenient and easy position, right? We understand that, you know, strikes are not an easy matter, and they require really strong internal solidarity, as well as, of course, support from our comrades from here and abroad. So, yeah, I would like to give the floor to Eliza to tell us more about how we can support the youth, and what are the steps that you're taking right now. Are there any, action or face-to-face protests going on in the coming days?
So first of all, we started the strike hindi naman, not really spontaneously. There was consultation, but a lot of what happened was a result of many of the Athenians seeing what happened to Cagayan, and there was a lot of emotion after seeing the effects of Typhoon Ulysses. So that's how it all started. And I guess jumping off from the point that we must link to a higher struggle, um, we acknowledge that part of the struggle too is that no student must be left behind. So that's us taking it into our own hands, that if the system itself would rather a minority of students be without their education, then we will, to say, kumbaga, make it come to a halt for everyone. So what we need in terms of internal support, I guess, is explaining to students that it is in fact imperative that we think about those who are without the same privileges as us. But yes, in terms of linking it not to a higher struggle, we understand, and this is the main point of the strike in itself, is that there wouldn't be this much of a problem if it weren't for the government's incompetence. So although it obviously is not limited to the Duterte administration, we recognize that. But it would be a major relief for all Filipinos if he were to either act or step down from his position. So there's also a need, I suppose, to help others, not just students, but parents, fellow professors, to understand that this is um, a a strength in numbers sort of situation. That if we all act together now, we will in fact have higher chances of getting the relief that we need. In terms of other points of support, then um, there has been a group of parents, but we're not. That's not confirmed, or we don't know if that's true. That um, are red tagging the students that are on strike. They're called the League of Parents of the Philippines, and they say that we strikers are recruiting actually students to join the CPP NPA, which is absurd because obviously um, none of the although the organizers that started the petition for the strike were previously organized people, it was largely spontaneous, and a lot of the students that did join or sign their names on the petition were from the masses of students talaga. They're not organized, so there's no recruitment happening. That's a blatant lie. So we would need more support from outside institutions to um, sort of clarify or to defend us from that sort of vilification. Um, yes. And if there are, of course, ways to connect for us to other sectors, primarily workers, farmers, um, urban poor, etc., we are very open to that because we know that with more sectors on our side, we have a higher chance, yun nga, of um, fighting against this fascist regime. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eliza. Well, I know that the day after the Youth Strike PH announced that they are on strike, the May 1 movement, or Kilusang Mayo Uno, or the Militant Workers Trade Union, immediately expressed their support for the student strike. And then the following day, faculty members from the University of the Philippines came out with a statement demanding an end to the semester, and then also the militant organization of educators in the University of the Philippines, Diliman, came out with a statement, of solidarity and announcing a strike also. And right now, an international support statement is being circulated and being signed by academics, researchers, community organizers, students like you worldwide. Um, our speakers are so efficient with time. So we have so much time, actually. We have more than 30 minutes. But I know we have to cover more because we promise that we're going to talk about, well, not just the strike, but the context of the strike and what's at stake and so on and so forth, how to actually create a strike wave. And Karina mentioned in her presentation or discussed Walter Rodney's concept of the guerrilla intellectual. And I know that Danny, in his own work as a journalist and a professor of journalism, is always talks about speaking truth to power, right? Well, this is my first time to be able to talk to Eliza, but I want to be able to know what actually made you commit to this idea of a guerrilla intellectual, or an academic who speaks truth to power. And I wish that Eliza could also speak to that after Karina and Danny. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, maybe I should start first. Is that okay, Corina? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, what led me to this kind of a perspective? Well, I think it has mainly to do with my youth because as a college student, just like Eliza, I was concerned about what's happening. But of course, the political awakening came a little bit late for me because as a high school student, much as I was a chair of the student council way back in high school, I was more career-oriented and academic-oriented at that particular time. But when I entered the University of the Philippines, I sort of got exposed to different kinds of thinking. Okay, so unlike the perspective of the the League of Parents of the Philippines, who would claim that there is a brainwashing mechanism or that there is an indoctrination room somewhere in the university, that's not really true. It's just that we're exposed to both conservative and radical ideas, and I gravitated more toward the progressive ideas, not because I'm adventurous or anything, but because these are the perspectives that would tend to take the side of the marginalized and the underrepresented. I mean, I don't want to defend the capitalists for the simple reason that they have already amassed so much. And why would I try to defend them all the more? Why do we need to empower more those in power, right? And then, of course, later on, of course, with that perspective, you would start with, okay, so making reforms within the system would be enough. For as long as we give them enough democratic space, maybe the farmers would be able to get their just share of the harvest, or the workers would be able to get the right salary if we just demand higher wages. And then later on, you begin to realize, no, it's really the system that is broken, and therefore you have to make sure that there will be systemic change. Now, what kind of systemic change will that be? So, of course, there are various perspectives about it, and I'm sorry if we don't have time to discuss the various perspectives. But the bottom line is there is an awakening. So it's very much like Marx. When you read the early Marx, who's very humanistic, the German ideology, for example, is very much different from Grundrisse or Das Kapital, right? So you would see a certain degree of progression in his analysis. And I think that's something true for many of us. So we see the development of our thinking for as long as we do two things. Number one, we read a lot, we research a lot. And number two, and this is most important, we integrate with the basic sectors of society. Because sometimes there are certain, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to some colleagues, but sometimes there are people who would just want to read and would just want to research, but they don't interact with the basic sectors of society. And I think for the youth of today, it's important to integrate. So that's why when I ventured into journalism, I am able to realize the myth of objectivity, the myth of neutrality, or the concept of false balance. Because journalism is supposed to provide a voice for the voiceless. There is a natural bias in truth telling because you are against lies, you are against fake news or false information, and there is an ideological component to the manufacturing of fake news. So it's an industry. It's not just a profit-oriented industry, but it works to the interest of a certain sector in society, right? So that's where we need to look at lies, for example, as not just a subjective construct, but rather these are objectively done by the powers that be to ensure that they can perpetuate themselves in power. Before they were lying, but now they are more brazen, mainly because of the crisis that is happening in society. So that's why Donald Trump and Duterte would have something in common when they lie to the teeth because they cannot manufacture anymore, or the truth, their version of the truth cannot hold anymore. So that's why they need alternative facts and alternative truths. So basically, so it makes sense to have a more progressive perspective given the situation that we're in right now, because that's just how it is. And for any right-thinking faculty and student, if you don't have that kind of a perspective, you have to rethink your position because sometimes being a conservative or being reactionary, it's something unconsciously done. Sometimes it's unconscious on your part. So that's why we have to be more circumspect in terms of how we view things. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Corina?
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate and agree with a lot of what Danilo said, and especially the last point. And I think of it not just in terms of reactionary, but certainly in the context of the U.S., it's a hegemonic liberalism. It's really tough to completely avoid that, and sometimes you find yourself even in radical circles with sort of the liberalism, reformism taking over. And I think that's always a constant sort of battle against that. But I also agree with you that it's for me too, that kind of awareness and consciousness was a process. In terms of, you asked Sarah about sort of getting to this idea of, the guerrilla intellectual, where for me, where it came from, actually being in Tunisia when I was there for several years after the uprising 2002 to 2010 to 11. I was working in the University of Tunis, and a couple of experiences there got me thinking about what is the role of the university. Firstly, because so many students had been involved in the uprising, and many of them became my students. And I was so excited to learn from them and from their experience. And they really got me to challenge the way I understand learning and, the context of the university. And of course, I'm a student of Paulo Freire, and I've thought about these pedagogy of oppressed and challenging hierarchies within the university before, but it was there that I really realized how crucial it was to learn from students, and not and in fact very rarely the other way around. So challenging not just hierarchies outside of the university, but also within the university. So that was one thing. And then I also, because I was looking at the role of the international context, the role of international financial institutions, I became very, what I realized is how interested they were in the university. They were just, not just international financial institutions, but the US Embassy, all the kind of imperialist powers were just, like flies buzzing around the university. And that made me really think like, oh, wow, there's a lot of power here. Like, what's going on? Why is everyone so interested in the university? And that is what got me thinking about the history of the university as an institution in the global South more generally, but especially in Tunisia, where it really has been a site of struggle between colonial, neo-colonial powers and anti-colonial, anti-imperialist forces. And so that is that's sort of where I first started really thinking, I guess in those terms, about the guerrilla intellectual. And I also read a little bit of, I started to read Fred Moten and Stefano Harney and their work on the undercommons, and thinking about sort of the place of the university, as again, a site of power, but also a place of resources, how resources can, I think they said at one point, the only relationship that the academic should have to the university is one of a thief, sort of thinking about resources and how they can be redistributed. And so, yeah, like thinking about myself and students as co-conspirators in terms of how we are, our political education, demystifying those systems that oppress us all, and working together to challenge them. That for me, was something that came out of a process, but also material circumstances. In the US, the majority of professors are adjunct. I myself am an adjunct. So I'm also precarious labor. As precarious labor, I have, I can lose my job any semester. If I lose my job, I lose my health care, because that's how it works in the US. Because I don't know in the Philippines if you have universal health care. We don't still here. So that again makes me think about linking the struggle within the university to the struggle outside of the university. And it also means that I share a lot in common with my students. I like what you said, Elisa, about not leaving any student behind. that's that's really crucial. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to think about here at CUNY, not leaving any vulnerable person behind, whether they're a student who can't pay the rent, because we have so many students who are food insecure. 1 in 2 CUNY students is food insecure. People losing their housing, people who lost family members, they've lost their jobs. They're in really precarious situation right now, and so are we. Not in the same precarity, but we are precarious. And so on that basis, we share something in common, and we need to transform this university. We need to transform it, and we need to transform this society, because it is not working on behalf of the majority. It's not working on behalf of the working class. It's not working on behalf of the oppressed and marginalized communities in our societies. And that's why we need to fight it together.
Thank you, Karina. Eliza?
Okay. So I think in terms of being awakened siguro politically, a lot of my generation, well, for me at least, my first political sort of moment, I guess, is the GMA Hello Garci scandal back in, well, I don't even remember. I was like 3, I guess. But it's really the material conditions that have urged students to stand up and assert their rights. Especially under the Duterte administration, we saw with the war on drugs, or yung Oplan Tokhang, many students were disturbed by what was happening, especially as it targeted the urban poor first and foremost. And that has led many students to sort of think, I guess, more deeply about the systems which we move in. And although many are still connected or coordinating with us through issue-based through issues, many also are looking at it as in terms of an imperialist, bureaucrat, capitalist, and feudal struggle.
Thank you so much, Eliza. We still have 2 more questions, and I actually have students in the Zoom classroom, and I hope that some of them would express their solidarity before we end. But first, I would like to read to you some of, there are activists who have joined us today. So I'd like to recognize, of course, one of the pillars of the academic and the workers' union in the University of the Philippines, Professor Judy Taguiwalo, who was also the former Department of Social Welfare Secretary, who was not reappointed by the Duterte regime because of the good work she's doing. We also have Carol Araulio, the chairperson of Bagong Alyansang Makabayan. We have Renato Reyes, chairperson of Bagong Alyansang Makabayan. We have students from Center for International Studies. We have our comrades from the Congress of Teachers and Educators for Nationalism and Democracy, or CONTENT, Professor Carlo Mongoya. I think there are more, but at this point, I'd like to read Carol Araulio's comment. Nakaka-inspire ang initiative ng Ateneo de Manila students. Unang-una, malinaw niyong sinabi ang point of view na hindi makasarili despite Ateneo de Manila students being quite privileged. They were able to put themselves in the place of many students hit many times over the effects of the pandemic, expounding on the catastrophic effects of typhoons, the government's more disastrous response all over the country to underscore the call, but then also explain why an academic strike is the correct response. What is an academic strike in the first place. Sana mas konkreto, mas simple, straightforward ang calls para tumago sa mas marami at maging rallying cries. Hopefully, we have a potential storm brewing that can lead to mass protests a la Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, and others. And then also we have, and then another question which anyone of you can respond to, and I think this was partly already discussed a while ago from Gerard Francis Palma. How do we integrate all sectors for this academic strike? I think we've all began doing that also, but if our speakers would like to speak to that. And then there's a question also from one of our faculty members who doesn't wish to be identified. It's for Professor Danilo Arao. What is your stand to this particular petition being forwarded by a number of faculty that calls for the extension of the semester? So I understand that the faculty over 100 faculty members already called for for ending the semester 3 days ago. So what is your stand on this new call, extend the semester, from professors in UP also?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have to have a clear dialogue regarding the matter, because both the call for extension and ending the semester have something in common, and that is we want to ease the academic burden being, and we have the interests of the students in mind. So let's be fair to those who are trying to push for an extension of the semester. They have the interests of the students in mind. However, we have to listen well to the students. Now, what did I do? What convinced me to end the semester? Actually, it's nothing subjective. You can even argue that it's more empirical rather than theoretical or ideological. It's empirical in the sense that I talked to my students. I conducted a quick survey. You saw the information that I flashed before you. Actually, there are 5 questions there, but 2 are bordering on the personal. So I'd rather not share the information there, but I checked with my students. So I know who among my students lost their houses. I know who among them live in the communities which were directly affected by the flood. I can identify students who have family problems. And I can also tell you some people who are on the verge of a mental breakdown. Okay, not just because they admitted it to me, but because I can read between the lines regarding, the papers they submit, as well as the way they behave in class, in our online classroom. So that's where integration becomes very important. Of course, we can talk about pedagogy all day long, from Freire to whoever, okay, or even to the more conservative, pedagogical thinkers out there. And then we can come up with a million reasons as to why we should continue and end the semester, because it's upon us as faculty members to teach. Teachers teach. We don't rest. I mean, that kind of discourse should be balanced with, addressing the interests of the students. Now, not only that, and we have to go back to what, for example, in the context of the University of the Philippines, no student should be left behind. In extending the semester, will we be leaving students behind? If the answer is yes, can we live with it? If the answer is yes, then it means that we are only after the interests, not just of all students, but of a certain number of students. And some of them would be, quite ironically, privileged enough to continue the semester. So that's where the unfairness and the lack of compassion and the lack of humanity would come in. So sometimes we get, comments that those who are trying to push for the end to end the semester has an agenda. Of course we have. Our agenda is to reaffirm what the university says about no student being left behind. If we end the semester now, it actually bolsters our initial assessment that it's not a good idea to resume the semester in the first place. Remember, we had that debate before whether or not we should resume the semester by, when did we start? August or September? In September, right? So therein lies the problem. And that would explain why in the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, they started late. They started in October in recognition of the hardship that we were going through last September. So I think we cannot be too dismissive in the context of alliance building with those who are pushing for extending the semester. But we can try our best to reason with them and to tell them that ending the semester would be the way to go, and that just like the previous semester, where we had a mass promotion and we had to end the semester, there is no qualitative change in the social conditions that would warrant something like extending the semester and assigning numeric grades to the students.
Thank you so much, Danny. Does anyone want to answer the question from Gerard? How do we integrate other sectors in this strike wave? Eliza, are there... Okay.
Okay. So what we're doing now, although we have received support now from different groups, like from the workers from KMU, from farmers, from the urban poor, we're still in contact. We're still looking for contacts and talking with them as to how they would wish to proceed with the call of a strike, if it will be if they will call for their own strikes, or if they will protest with us in the streets. And actually, I believe there's going to be a multi-sectoral mobilization later at 4 p.m. at Ateneo Gate 2.5. So that's an concrete, actionable way that the integration with the other sectors is happening right now.
Thank you, Eliza. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. So also, Nathaniel Kapinpin, as a of the policies being implemented by organizations and institutions of measures of excellence, especially during this time when we're fighting against tyranny, when we're trying to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic and the typhoon. So I think it's very important to take that into consideration as teaching staff. Empathy and compassion are competencies. Um, is there anything else that people would like to add? I know that students are here. They can just unmute um, microphones and send their solidarity messages, express their solidarity messages. All right, Karina, go ahead. Karina? Karina wants to say something?
I just wanted to say one thing about the kind of, it's really interesting hearing you talk about what you're up against. I was thinking about the red tagging in the US context. We call it red baiting. And that's always a way, one of the strategies to delegitimize strikes, people calling for strikes, and how also power always projects what they do onto you. They're undemocratic. They're disruptive. They're the ones who are putting obstacles in the way to our well-being, our education, and yet they place the blame on us. If it weren't for these structural issues, we wouldn't have to go on strike. And so I think but it takes a lot of strength and resilience to stand up to that. So I'm just in awe of what you all are doing. And I just want to say that to begin with, and then, and to say fully support, and my solidarity is with you. And I'm learning so much listening to you. And one last point I want to make, which is that I know in one of the calls that I read that Sarah sent me, or maybe it was the Solidarity petition, talked about education, how the strike is also a process of education. You know, so education doesn't just only happen in classrooms, right? It's through the strikes that we learn about, we raise class consciousness, that we learn about solidarity. We learn about how power works. And it reminds me of a quote by Lenin, who called strikes a school of war. He said, strikes are a school in which the workers learn to make war on their enemies for the liberation of the whole people, of all who labor from the yoke of government officials and from the yoke of capital. So I thought that was a good quote that I just wanted to share with you all. But I'm just sending my solidarity and let us know what we can do. You're muted, Sarah.
Okay, are there any questions that we have, but I missed to read? No more. Okay, so, all right. Shall I ask Danny and Eliza for their parting shots, and then we'll make a few announcements for our next sessions. Go ahead, Danny, and then
Okay.
Eliza.
Well, of course, I'm not good when it comes to closing remarks, but of course, we just want to say that much as I cannot speak for the entire faculty of the University of the Philippines, many faculty members are one with the students in the struggle for social change. And we are very thankful to the Ateneo de Manila University, to the concerned students of Ateneo, for taking the lead in the academic strike. So one government official said that helping other people is not a competition. And for the many universities, we're not competing with each other as to how many warm bodies we can mobilize, because we need as much support as possible. And you can count on the faculty to help you in this regard. And as Corina mentioned a while ago, learning doesn't stop inside Zoom, Discord, Google Meets, or whatever online platform we're using. So society is our bigger classroom, and I think it is time that we teach this government a lesson. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone here for their support. It means a lot to us, especially for us organizers, most of which are scholars. So really our future is on the gambling table now. We would like to ask for your continued solidarity, and that if you have any suggestions, ideas, criticisms, we are always open to that. We are always open to more voices. The strikes are collaborative in nature. So we, all in all, we would like to say thank you. And the fight is far from over, and mabuhay ang pagwewelga.
Thank you so much, Eliza. Thank you so much, Danny and Karina. And this will not be the last time that we'll be seeing each other on Zoom, because we will stage more events in the future to consolidate our ranks, not just here in the Philippines, but from the Philippines to our comrades in the US and different parts of the world. So this is a class on the Marxism we need, right? As a class, we have been focusing on national liberation struggles. We've been focusing on anti-imperialist movements, anti-colonial struggles. What does it mean to decolonize? What does it mean to support Palestinian liberation movement? What does it mean to support Black liberation, and to really go back to the history of Black power? I think it's not an accident that today we have people from the First Quarter Store movement, that movement that started, or that commenced this mass movement against the U.S. Marcos dictatorship. So we have Carol Aralio, we have Judy Tagiwalo, and I think we have more. And I don't think they're here just because they don't have anything to do today. But this is quite connected with our unfinished struggle. And this is not the first time that students like Eliza have actually rose to the occasion. That when people are facing really massive violation of human rights, mass looting, and so on and so forth. And this kind of struggle has been won by the first quarter storm 50 years ago. In fact, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first quarter storm. And what that movement actually did is to pose the Marxist-Leninist problem of the masses. How can a political force materialize among the toiling masses of workers and peasants of Philippine society? It's still the same problem that we're facing, but it's a very good problem. And we have, movements worldwide, not just in the US, but especially movements in the global South, which share the same predicament and which share a similar program of action, not only among students, but also among the basic sectors, organized basic sectors. So, we move forward, and we are inviting you all to our Monday session. On Monday, we will be discussing, it's a shameless plug. We have a book. It's the University and Social Justice Struggles Across the Globe. So we have a chapter here on the history of the Kabataang Makabayan and the history of struggles in the University of the Philippines. So we will be discussing that vis-a-vis our friends and comrades from the Ateneo de Manila University who are pushing a new strike wave at this moment. So we'll see you again on Monday, 10 to 11:30, and we're again inviting Danny and Karina and every one of you, everyone who's here today. Thank you so much at Mabuhay. Mabuhay ang welga. Mabuhay ang welgang bayan. Mabuhay ang strike. Thank you so much. And okay, I'm so sorry, but I've heard that part of this, a huge part of our discussion is not being recorded visually on Facebook. I did something wrong. I'm very sorry. So we're safe. We will be uploading the recording of this on the CIS page, and we'll be distributing it. We'll be posting it, and I hope you repost it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Lahat ng mga estudyante.
Maraming salamat.
Solidarity.
Buhay.
Solidarity. Long live.